You're outdated. That's what she said before I'd even set my bag down. Camilla Pierce, 30 years old, freshly promoted to Vice President of Innovation, tossed the words across the conference table like they were an agenda item. For a second, I thought she was joking. Then I saw the neat stack of envelopes beside her tablet and the HR rep standing stiffly by the door. My stomach tightened. It had started earlier that morning. The rain was coming down in that soft, steady drizzle Seattle does best. My parking spot reserved for 18 years wasn't empty. A white Porsche sat there, still wearing its dealer plates, its vanity tag reading Innovate. I ended up in visitor parking, right under the dripping fir trees, wiping rain off my badge before walking in. Even Marcus, the security guard who used to bring me his wife's muffins, wouldn't meet my eyes. By the time I reached the third floor, the silence told me everything. The buzz of printers, the clatter of keyboards muted, doors half closed, people pretending not to see me. 25 years designing UAV guidance systems for aerovionics, 9 patents under my name. And suddenly I was radioactive. Camilla perched on the edge of my boss's desk when I walked in, sleek and impatient, like someone checking their reflection in success. "We're restructuring," she said, flipping a stylus between her fingers. "You'll get the details in your packet. I didn't sit down. I didn't speak. I just watched the girl who'd been in middle school when I built the system that kept this company alive through the 2008 crash tell me I was obsolete. Her confidence was perfect polished, untested, and cruel in that casual way the young can be when they've never failed. I straightened my badge, a habit I'd picked up back when it meant something. "Then let's get this over with," I said, and sat down. Camilla smiled, as if she'd been waiting for me to make it official. She slid an envelope across the table, and just like that, the storm outside found its way in. Camilla didn't bother to look up when she said it. "Effective immediately. Your position is restructured." Her tone was brisk, efficient like deleting a file. The conference room smelled faintly of lemon polish and burnt coffee. A single sheet of paper lay on the table between us, her manicured finger resting lightly on the corner. I stayed standing, my coat still damp from the rain. "I don't understand," I said, keeping my voice level. "My team's project will be reassigned." She interrupted. "Technology moves fast." "Mara, you're outdated." The word landed like a flick to the face, sharp, precise, meant to sting without leaving a mark. Camilla finally glanced up, her eyes flicking over my gray-streaked hair, my worn leather notebook. She smiled faintly, the way people smile at museum exhibits they think they've outgrown. She pushed the paper forward a check. "Final compensation package," she said. I picked it up. $3,000. The number felt wrong. Too small. Like a typo in someone else's story. "3,000, I asked quietly. "Severance," she corrected. "Calculated per company policy." Her voice had that clipped rhythm I'd heard too many times from executives who mistook procedure for authority. My throat was dry, but I managed a nod. "I see. You should be grateful," she added, still scrolling through her tablet. "Some people don't get transition packages at all." Grateful. The word echoed in my chest. 25 years of patents, testing flights, and all-night code rewrites, and she wanted gratitude. I folded the check once, carefully, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. "Thanks for letting me know," I said, hearing my own calmness like it belonged to someone else. "Security will escort you out," she said without looking up. "I know the way." As I turned to leave, the hum of the city outside felt strangely far away, like sound underwater. My reflection on the glass door looked older than I remembered, tired, yes, but steady. The envelope pressed against my heart as I walked down the corridor. $3,000. That was the price they'd put on 25 years of my life. I carried the cardboard box from my office supply closet, the same one I'd kept folded in the bottom drawer for years just in case. I used to joke that I'd retire before I ever needed it. Now it sat open on my desk, waiting. Around me, the office felt smaller, quieter than I remembered. The soft whir of printers, the steady hum of air vents, all sounded distant. People glanced up from their monitors when I passed, then looked away just as quickly. One of the new interns pretended to read something on his screen, his face flushing pink. On the main hallway wall, a series of glass frames shimmered under the fluorescent lights. 15 plaques, Aerovionics' proudest patents, each numbered, dated, and displayed like trophies. I stopped in front of them. 9 were mine. My handwriting, my designs, my long nights spent running simulations that kept this company afloat during the years the market nearly collapsed. Yet the plaques carried no names, only patent numbers. To anyone else, they were anonymous milestones. To me, they were fingerprints, mine, silenced behind glass. Camila's laughter carried from the corner office. "We just saved a fortune today," she said, voice bright and cutting. Someone answered her with a cheer. I turned away before I saw who it was. Back at my desk, I set the photo of Nathan Reyes on top of my monitor. He'd been my first mentor, a retired Navy pilot with a crooked smile and the habit of calling me kid, even when I was 40. In the picture, he was handing me my first patent certificate, the day I thought I'd finally earned permanence. I could still hear him saying, "If they ever forget your worth, make sure the paperwork remembers." I ran my thumb over the frame's edge. Maybe I'd finally understand what he meant. I sealed the box, lifted it into my arms, and glanced once more at the wall of nameless plaques. Then I walked away, the echo of my footsteps steadier than I felt. That night, the rain hadn't stopped. It pressed against the windows in steady rhythm as I sat at the dining table, the cardboard box from work still unopened by the door. The check lay in front of me, its edges curling slightly from where I'd held it too long. $3,000 less than a single week of what I used to earn. I stood, walked to the hallway closet, and pulled down a small black safe from the top shelf. Inside was an old blue binder, its spine faded and the pages inside yellowed at the edges. My employment contract. Nathan had helped me negotiate it 25 years ago, insisting that I never sign anything I didn't fully understand. He'd even brought in his own lawyer to review it. Back then, I thought he was being dramatic. Now, my hands trembled slightly as I flipped through the pages. The clause was there buried halfway through, highlighted in pale ink that had barely faded. If monthly compensation, including severance, falls below $4,000, all patents authored by Mara Ellison shall revert to her sole ownership after 30 days. I read it twice, then again. Each time, the words seemed to burn brighter. I picked up my phone and searched my contacts for a number I hadn't dialed in years. Irving Delgado, Nathan's old patent attorney. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm but cautious. "Mara Ellison." "It's been a while. I need you to pull the original contract Nathan filed," I said. "There's something I think I missed." "Give me a minute." The line went silent except for the faint rustle of paper. When he came back, his tone had changed low, deliberate. "Found it. And yes, the clause is still valid. If they paid you less than $4,000, $3," I said quietly. He exhaled. "Then they just bought themselves a disaster. For the first time all day." I felt the corner of my mouth lift, not in triumph, but in recognition. Nathan hadn't just taught me to build machines. He'd built a safety net out of foresight and ink. Outside. The rain softened. Inside. I picked up the check and began to plan. Tom was in the garage when I told him. The space smelled faintly of motor oil and sawdust, the familiar scent of his half-finished projects. He was bent over a small radio he'd been fixing for weeks, one of the habits he'd picked up since his layoff. When I finished explaining what Irving had found, he set down the screwdriver and looked at me, his brow furrowing for a moment before a small smile crept in. "They called you outdated," he said quietly. "Let's see who really is." I laughed once, softly, It wasn't joy, exactly. More like the release of something that had been coiled inside me since that morning. The next day, I went to the bank. The teller didn't know that the small, creased check I slid across the counter was about to detonate an empire. She smiled politely, stamped the deposit slip, and handed it back to me. "Funds available in 3 business days," she said. I thanked her and walked out into the gray light, rain pooling around the curb. Back home, I set up my old scanner on the kitchen table. One by one, I fed each page of the contract through the paper, whispering as it passed under the light. Every clause, every signature, every initial. When I finished, I sent the files to Irving's secure email. 10 minutes later, he replied, "It's airtight." I sat back in my chair. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. I deleted my company contacts, wiped my work laptop, and placed it neatly back in its case. The gesture felt ceremonial, like closing a door I no longer needed to walk through. That night, Tom poured us each a glass of wine. "You're awfully calm," he said. "I'm done being angry," I told him. "Anger's noisy. This," I tapped the folder on the table, "is quiet." He raised his glass. "To quiet things that make noise later." We clinked glasses, and the sound was small but sharp, like the click of a trigger. The first week passed quietly, like the long inhale before a storm. Every morning, I opened my laptop and checked my email. Nothing from Irving yet. Nothing from Aerovionics. Just silence. Camilla, however, was far from quiet. Her face appeared on LinkedIn posts and industry newsletters, praising her own initiative to streamline outdated structures. I read her captions once, then closed the tabs. There was no anger left in me, only a stillness that felt sharper than rage. Tom tried to act calm too, though I could see the fatigue in the way he moved. The cardiologist had confirmed he'd need a minor valve repair soon. "It's routine," he told me, smiling through it, but we both knew what routine meant in our kind of insurance plan. $22,000 routine. Our daughter, Lena, called that night from Palo Alto. She'd been accepted to Stanford's engineering program, and though she tried to sound excited, her voice trembled at the edges. "Mom, if it's too much, I can defer a year," she said. I forced a smile she couldn't see through the phone. "You're not deferring anything," I told her. "We'll manage." After she hung up, I sat at the kitchen table with Tom, the checkbook open between us. We didn't speak for a while. It wasn't sadness that sat there, it was quiet calculation. I'd spent half my life building systems that could guide aircraft through storms. Now I was building one to steer us through this. At night, when the house was dark, I'd play the old voicemail Nathan left me years ago. His voice was rough, steady. "They'll confuse longevity with expendability. Don't let them, kid. The day they forget what you're worth, let the paperwork remind them." The message always ended with a faint laugh, as if he'd known this day would come. On the 30th night, I stood by the window watching rain blur the city lights, one hand resting over the folder on the table. 30 days, he'd said, and 30 days were almost up. At 12:01 a.m. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft rain against the roof. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, watching the seconds change on the digital clock. Then, just like that, it happened. No sound, no alert, no announcement. Somewhere in a government database, 9 ownership records shifted, company name replaced with mine, Mara Ellison. The transfer was invisible, but I felt it. Not like revenge, not even relief, just the steady click of justice settling into place. I closed the laptop and leaned back, listening to the storm ease outside. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled without counting the cost. At 9 sharp, Irving called. "Fax went through," he said. "They've been notified." The letter was brief. "Unauthorized use constitutes infringement. Licensing required to continue operations." I pictured the executive floor in Seattle, the glass boardroom, The long table, the digital displays flashing error codes as someone realized the patents they'd been using no longer belonged to them. A slow smile crept across my face. Any word yet, I asked. Not yet, he replied. But by mid-morning, they'll understand what happened. Let them sit in it for a few hours. I poured myself a cup of coffee and took it to the window. The rain had stopped. Across the street, a delivery truck idled in the gray light, headlights still on. The world, as always, kept moving. Tom came in, rubbing sleep from his eyes. It's done. It's done. He smiled, kissed the top of my head, and went to make breakfast. By 10:30, my phone started buzzing blocked numbers, unknown area codes, emails marked urgent. I silenced the notifications and took another sip of coffee. Let them find out the hard way. They'd made me irrelevant. But this morning, without a single word spoken, I had become the one person they couldn't operate without. The next morning, the sky over Seattle was a dull sheet of gray. I dressed the way I had for every major presentation of my career: navy blazer, pressed blouse, hair tied back, no anger, no nerves, just purpose. Irving met me in the lobby of Aerovionics, his briefcase in hand. They're waiting upstairs, he said quietly. The board, the CEO, and her. When the elevator doors opened, the hallway was hushed. Through the glass walls of the executive boardroom, I could see them all, 6 faces lined with tension. Camilla stood near the window, tablet clutched like a shield. The color had drained from her cheeks. We entered without ceremony. Irving greeted no one. He set 3 copies of the licensing agreement on the table and slid one toward the CEO. Here are the terms, he said evenly. $2.4 million per year, paid in advance. $550,000 in retroactive fees for unauthorized use. All future documentation and product material must acknowledge Ms. Ellison as the patent holder of record. The CFO's jaw tightened. The CEO stared at the papers, his thumb tapping the table. Camilla finally spoke. Voice brittle. This is insane. We can't afford that. We're offering to negotiate a buyout instead. Irving's tone didn't change. The agreement isn't negotiable. Camilla turned to me then, her eyes sharp with something between anger and fear. You're doing this out of spite. I was trying to modernize. I met her gaze. You called me outdated, I said softly. Turns out, I built everything you sell. Silence stretched across the table. Outside, the rain had started again, faint against the glass. The CEO leaned back, exhaling. Sign it, he said finally. The pen moved from hand to hand. Signatures in dark ink sealed 25 years of quiet work. Camilla was the last. Her hand trembled as she wrote her name, not daring to look up. When it was over, Irving gathered the documents. Pleasure doing business, he said. As we turned to leave, I heard the CEO murmur to her, voice low and heavy. You saved $800. It just cost us $3 million. The wire transfer arrived on a Thursday morning, 2 deposits. Crisp and silent, $2.4 million and $550,000. No congratulations, no phone call, just numbers flickering on a screen. I stared at them for a long moment, feeling not triumph, but a kind of quiet rightness, like gravity settling back into place after being ignored. Tom's surgery was scheduled that same week. I signed every hospital form without hesitation and handed the finance clerk my card before she could mention payment plans. She blinked when I said, in full, please, while they prepped him for surgery. He squeezed my hand and grinned. Guess we're not outdated either. I smiled. No, love. We're just built to last. Lena called from campus 2 days later, excitement spilling through the phone as she registered for her classes. I listened to her talk about robotics, her new roommates, her plans to join the Women's Engineering Society. When she paused to ask how we were managing, I told her simply, everything's covered. Later that week, I wrote a check for $100,000 to a foundation that funded scholarships for women in aerospace. I asked them to name one after Nathan Reyes. He'd taught me everything that mattered: how to design, how to think, and how to protect the work that bore my name. A news alert popped up that night: Camilla Pierce resigns from Aerovionics. The company issued a polished statement thanking me for my legacy contributions to innovation and ethics in engineering. I read it once, then closed the article. Tom came home the next day, pale but smiling, a long scar marking where his heart had been fixed. I made soup. He made jokes about hospital food, and the house felt lighter than it had in months. When I sat by the window that evening, the rain was steady again, tapping softly against the glass. I thought of all the nights I'd listened to it while waiting for recognition, for fairness, for peace. Now, I had all three, quietly, completely, and on my own terms. By spring, the house had found its rhythm again. The scent of soil drifted in from the garden where Tom spent his mornings planting tomatoes in neat, patient rows. From my desk by the window, I could see him bend, adjust, and move with the kind of quiet purpose I had once reserved for code and circuit diagrams. I worked differently now: no deadlines, no status meetings, no polite small talk with people who didn't understand what they were touching. My new project was a drone safety system designed for wildfire rescue operations: low-cost sensors that could guide aircraft through smoke where GPS failed. It felt good to build something that might save lives instead of just profit margins. The days began early and ended when the light faded. Sometimes I'd pause mid-design, listening to the faint hum of the neighborhood lawnmowers, kids on bikes, distant gulls from the sound. The silence that used to ache now felt earned. Lena called every Sunday from Stanford, her voice bright with the impatience of discovery. "We're building a small quadrotor that can scan collapsed buildings," she said one afternoon. "It's rough, but it works." I smiled, picturing her hunched over her workstation, eyes shining the way mine used to in the lab. "Make sure you record everything," I told her. "Designs fade, paperwork lasts." Tom laughed from the garden when he overheard. "You sound just like your mentor," he called through the window. He was right. That night, I found the old voicemail again. Nathan's voice, rough and certain. "You're not furniture. You're the foundation." I played it once more, letting it fill the quiet room. The words no longer hurt. They built something instead. I closed my laptop, the hum of its fan slowing to silence. Outside, the first tomatoes were beginning to ripen, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled faintly over the sound. I stood, stretched, and whispered to no one in particular, and the foundation's just getting started. Then, smiling to myself, I added softly, "They thought I was outdated. I was just ahead of schedule.